Yeah, and what you're saying, Cello, is that you're running through these questions now, but the idea is to have the workshop, if you want to call it that, to basically have the team evaluate the questions and make sure that they're adequate and cover everything, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. Because the workshop is supposed to correct the thing that Yvonne was saying. Well, they're just telling us what what they're doing, but they're not asking us anything. Well, here you can then, each one of these things has a drop-down menu. So, okay, let's talk about whether, the drop-down menu on these things, and the drop-down menu opens up when, you have data specified. So you're constructing something that can be, if you're going to use Power BI or something like that, that can be compatible, that can be standardized. We can, and then it doesn't have to be a website. I put the whole thing into this spreadsheet, all 4 levels, and it would basically be to help construct the content that what the spreadsheet is going to look like.
And then you're just using Mural to basically, and maybe different colors of stickies to indicate, what you think about these questions, and that would be the
So this is that level 1 question 1 is this. So if I go to the Mural, it says, okay, this is the question. Do you want to change the question? So there's room here for changing the question. Do you want to change the response options? Put sticky notes here so that we collect the comments. And it's like that for every column of that spreadsheet.
Right. So it would be important to basically introduce this in a way where people are going to understand what we're dealing with and what is being asked of them in the workshop, right?
Yeah, but I wanted to talk to the core team, and for the core team, I'm saying, let me know how you'd want to structure this workshop. How can we make this interactive and so that people own it, that they have a chance, including you guys, to say, well, I think this should be changed. I can send the reason that I don't want to send out a spreadsheet is because it'll be nice to have in one document comments from everybody, rather than 10 people sending me different set of comments, and it'd be difficult,
I think that makes sense, Cello. Sorry I'm late. So I didn't capture the beginning of it, but I think I understand the outcome of what you're looking for from us is the feedbacks on how to structure this workshop, which will include a broader team, the SMEs level, to provide the feedback for this kind of a template to capture the data standard, to further to do data analytics and other transformations. What you said was really helpful. The outcome and the background, like you said, is each utility might doing something different. It's really hard to share. So I think it might be good to having just in written form, like a slides why we are doing that, and even asking questions on the challenges of what they already have before we do this exercise, just to getting people more up to speed of the purpose of doing that and how they might be utilizing a tool like this, because so that people have the buy-in and the being active engagement at the beginning.
Okay.
So that's one. The second, I think it's the spreadsheet. It looks good. One thing I don't know is whether you have included integration as another column or category. What I found is, we have the data stored somewhere, and depends on who you ask, they will say we have the data owners or things. So example is we are monitoring the industrial discharge. And then the problem is we have the R&D group is monitoring and testing all the sensor data and looking to the pH and spikes and things. And then on the operational arm, we have the source control program, and they are doing the day-to-day, the decision making. So we need to go after or talk with the industries or things because there's a potential pH spike. So there is a gap between the communication that broke down between the R&D and the source control program. What I'm saying is the problem that could be solved by a technology solution is to having this data integrated and showing up on the Power BI rather than a specific software that's only being used for by the R&D folks. So I think the data integration is a big part for utilities to be able to collaborate across function teams together.
Yeah, so level 1 is the way it's defined in that model is really just is data even being collected? You know, is it being collected? And it includes questions like who's responsible for generating the data? You know, who does it type it in or send, you know, whatever it is, you know, how is it documented? Who is who would be using this data? And how would you describe the current data collection generation capabilities for, you know, in this case, you know, operational data? This is just how to bring the data in is level 1. Level 2 then says how the data is managed and organized. So you say, what is the format? So let's see what the format is. So is it paper records? Is it files that are on local drives? Is it files that are on shared drives or in the cloud? Is the data contained within a software application that's the authoritative source, which means is it structured? Or is it published to data marts or data warehouse? So in a workshop, I would ask, this is what we have on the drop-down menu right now. Do you think that this is useful? So if you know who is generating data, you know what format it is, then you say, okay, this is about reliability. How much of this data is questionable? This is about the completeness. And you say, okay, I'm not sure, more than 5% of the records are missing, less than 5, no missing records, and less than 10% of attributes missing, and 1% of records and attributes missing. So you get some sense. And these, in the workshop, I was going to talk about, these are the numbers and things that I thought were reasonable, but people could say, you know, you should have 50 instead of 5 or 20 instead of 5. I don't mind. So then, and the level 4, so the question 4 says, how is the data organized? You know, in terms of hierarchy, naming convention, and taxonomy. Is it poorly organized? Does it meet the basic needs? It meets the basic needs and is well documented. And so all of this is up for discussion and change. But I wanted to have at least a straw man. So this level 2 is once you have the data in, and in my experience, this is the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that a pump has a different name in the CAD system and a different name in the control system and a different name in the CMMS. And you know, so that's really before we get to data integration. And then third layer is integrating and analyzing. So
yeah, I think yours is really a granular level of the level 1. I hear you. I think it's looking to data standard. I think you may find the utilities will, you know, like me, talk about the use case or challenges that sometimes it's not so linear and you can categorize with one box and with one answer. So there might be multiple responses for one box? Who's yielding the data? It could be both the the R&D group as well as the operational group. So how we capture that multiple choices.
Yes. That's a very legitimate question. And in the mural session, what I thought in the workshop, you would bring up this and we would say, okay, and maybe we need to add questions. Maybe we need to add options. Maybe we need to, whatever it is, so that we can then address a real use case. I'm open to any of this.
So just to Ting's question, it's kind of, do level 3 or 4 include this integration and get at that, or is it back in the systems where you want to identify those things that this particular process needs to be integrated with?
Scott has his hand up.
Discussion. Yeah.
Hey,
Scott.
everyone. Sorry I'm late. I tried to monitor both meetings. It was an epic fail on my part. But thank you for recording it. I'll go back and watch. I'm picking up on the conversation in the middle here, so I'm sorry if things have already been covered. But one thing I wanted to sort of speak to from what I've seen so far is it is very linear, sort of the way you've got this at least placed in it. I understand exactly kind of the logic model that you're using here, Cello. But let me give you a couple of examples of some things that are real world that we've done that actually show how you can sort of get to the same spot from multiple views. Does that make sense? So multiple perspectives. So one of the things that I do quite frequently here, so back up, the history of our data in this organization that I work for is just a hodgepodge of disasters, sort of point A to point B. Pick a system. You can look at our CIS, you can look at our CMMS system, you can look at our really our inspection software, so on and so forth down the line. And there's to your point about level 2, there being disagreement between all those major systems is absolute. We have that in pretty much every place that we look, including our GIS. I'll just throw that out there as well. So so I spent a lot of time figuring out how can I make this known to everybody in a way that is effective and actually allows them to then go back to the first steps and say, we need to consider this sort of at the beginning. And one of the ways that you do that is through integrating the data that you have. Right. So you take these tools that are incomplete and that are inaccurate in some places, and you put them together, you integrate them into aggregation of some sort, either a GIS tool, any Power BI, whatever, and you put that before the business owner and you say, here's what they look at it. The very first thing they often say is, well, this is wrong. This isn't right. This is wrong. And I say, well, this is what your data is telling me. Right. And then that sparks the conversation to say, oh, we need to improve how our data is collected, how our data is managed. It really gets that it brings it home in a way to them that is real at that point. Because the reason that that's effective is because when the data is aggregated is typically when the decision point occurs. Does that make sense? Where am I going to deploy my inspection crews? Where am I going to any number of other business activities that we undertake at least in this organization? And I guess what I'm saying is it's it's almost counterintuitive that you would do it that way, but it's really impactful and effective to do it that way because it puts front and center the nature of the data, the quality of the data, and the issues that need to be fixed to make it operate and really make a decision support system better, if that makes sense. So that's how we do it. And I'm not saying that the way you've got this laid out is in any way, because we essentially consider, at least of all the things that I've seen so far, we consider it the way that you got it laid out. We might have some small tweaks, but if I'm another utility and I'm wanting to figure out how to do this, right? You kind of have to look at it from multiple different perspectives, and say here are the approaches that you can engage to get to that point. That's sort of been my experience.
I think you're absolutely correct, and it's very good insight. And the other thing about the way I'm going about it, it's really about looking at the as is, because if you wanted to go and look at 2B, you would actually have the reverse process. Instead of saying starting from which data are we collecting, you state which data do we need.
But what I'm saying to you is sometimes people don't even know, like, to even state the as is, they don't even know where the holes in the as is are, or where the problems in the as is are. And so the way that you can kind of show them where that is you just tie it all together and say, here's what we have, right? And then, boy, that's where that kind of jump starts the as is conversation, right, if you will. Or one thing we do too is sometimes we just skip the as is because we know it's so screwed up, and we go to the 2B and we say, this is what we're going to design the systems to, such as they are. And then, we'll sort of mitigate what's happened in the past. And I have some examples of that if you're interested in sort of the way that looks. But these are real world things we use.
Yeah, that's excellent. And what we can do is I'm completely open to to changing any or all of these things, rearranging them and adjusting them to so that they can be applied from different angles. And this additional, all that is up for change and adjustment. Scott?
It also what's Scott, I mean, those are really great insights. It sounds like what you're saying is looking at the overall system architecture as it relates to a particular business process that you're working with helps you deal with identifying the as is and enables you to see where the gaps are and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's funny, Scott, to just, I'll try to sort of address what you said there. I think you're exactly right. But in order, so to do that, makes it more of a systemic, holistic process, right? In other words, you've got to have the people in the room that understand the system architecture as well as the business group or whomever that you're affecting, right? Because what I found is, and this is where what we're doing here is I just think it's so critical, and why I think I'm so passionate about it is because if you're going to be an asset manager, which is what ostensibly my title is, right? I've got to be able to sit in the worlds of both and see the holes in both. I've got to see the holes in what the business process person is saying or doing, and I've got to see the holes in the way the architecture is designed or the data is designed in the organization, and provide because if you just ask like the business process folks where the holes in the information are, right? Well, they're going to give you a perspective, but they're not going to have any understanding of why you can or can't do that based on the architecture that you have. Does that make sense? So that it's like you have to look at it both ways, and you have to bring both sets of people in the room, and then you've got to have a couple, like a team or Yvonne or whomever, sitting there going, hey, navigating in between the two groups and being able to speak in their languages accordingly to do it effectively. And a tool like this is a great, like, sort of a baseliner for that process.
So those are really insightful comments, and I think that dealing with these comments as we deal with them, we could significantly improve how this stuff, looks like and how it could work. And I'm in no way married to this, and I also understand that it is linear. And it is linear, and it does kind of say, okay, let's figure out what we have now. And it is not kind of modular, and it, and we can make it like that.
So it sounds like you're saying a couple things. One is it speaks to who needs to be in the room. Is one thing.
Absolutely.
The second thing is that I mean, this is one of the issues we're facing. We're looking at a specific business process, and you're not throwing that out the window, but you're saying in order to be effective in dealing with that, we may need a separate set of questions related to the overall, let's just call it business architecture, that relates to this system with the appropriate people in the room.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Is and it's sort of like I too sort of, I think the things I'm saying is exactly true. Who's in the room and where do you start? Because here's the thing. This is my experience. I'd be interested in Ting and Yvonne's experience with this. Is like pretty much you can pick any business process, Scott, and the problems that plague it pretty much plague every other business process as you have as it relates to the validity of information, right? And the you know, some spots in our organization, the data is actually pretty good, and the business process works. There's a problem. The flaw is more with the business process or the way that the business process is carried out, right? The flip side of that is there are some places where the business process has worked for 100 years cleaning sewers, right? But the data element of that is just totally disaster, right? Yeah. And it's like, that's why both groups are so necessary in that mix. And to your other point, if you aggregate it right into something, then there's like a list of questions I think we could generate to say, hey, your business process works, but your data sucks. Here are the things that you need to then, here's the next set of questions you need to ask, right? As it relates to improving the data, right? Or vice versa, or something along those lines. And I've done both. I can tell you, I've done both, and but that's the only way I can figure out to to do that.
And I'm hearing you also say, like, the business process people, a lot of them are doing it absent even looking at technology. But here is the data analytics technology group. And what you're really saying is here on the linear stuff that that Cello lays out, that's absolutely essential. But you also need, which I'm hearing you say, this other element that expands on this. He has a data, here's the data and here's the systems, but maybe an elaboration on systems and data to include, integration more fully, so that you can assess what you have and what you're working with, and having the right people in the room to discuss it.
I personally think you're right. Yeah, that's good. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and I totally I get your point. And what we can do is we can work with this as a straw man and add and change and improve not just the, what gets on the drop down list, but also which questions get asked. We can change that. Also connected to some things like who should be in the room, because to know who should be in the room, you kind of have to have a process map to have the swim lanes and know who's even involved. So
one other one too, and I don't know, I'm sorry, I did not see this, Cello, along those lines, but one of the big things that's really important in this is what I call problem definition, right? Mm-hmm. So what is the thing that we're trying to do, right? It could be related, most of the times it is related to a business process, right? We don't have KPIs for blank, right? Okay, so you clearly state that up front, like what sort of the begin with the end in mind. I know we're all familiar with that terminology, right? But because that sets the tone. If you think about it, when you say it like that, then immediately the data people start thinking, well, here's all the problems of trying to do that because the data doesn't do this and it doesn't do this and it doesn't do this, right? And the business process people say we can't do that or whatever, right? And it kind of clearly draws that line and allows for that real good, rich conversation to how these problem solve from that point to occur. So I don't know if you have that somewhere in this map, but
well, let me let
I'm
me,
always amazed by this. I'm sorry to pontificate, but I'm always amazed about how little time is spent on that perspective. People just start jumping into what's the technology fix or what's the operational fix without ever saying in clear terms, this is what we're trying to do or not do. It just blows my mind.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And, you know, I agree. I shared this before you joined and before we started recording. So in reaction to what Mike Sweeney was saying at previous meetings, I tried to lay out sort of like what's the, you know, how would you even approach this? Because we have, you know, all these initiatives here. But basically, I thought, okay, you can select what's your main focus, to just look at organization and workforce improvement, or to look at process. And they are all related, but you know, we have to kind of, like you say, you know, look at from different angles. So if it comes to this part, then I think that there are, before you do anything, you first have to look at what are your processes, what are your priorities, then you're going to pick something out of that. And then I have some questions in terms of what the business needs to decide, in terms of, you know, you picked something. How complicated what you picked? Is it something like you will see in this question? You know, let me see where it is. You know, how complicated it is. Is this something that an individual does? You know, let me see if this will help. If there's something that an individual does, like calibrating an instrument, or is this, you know, done by a team, by 2 or more teams within the department, who's included, or teams from different departments, and then, you know, different teams, departments, including executive management, like who is involved in this? Because it probably doesn't have sense to have the same kind of approach if you're trying to improve how somebody calibrates a Venturi meter than if somebody tries to improve CIP. So, you know, and the second question was, give me just a second. What are you trying to do? What does this process impact? What's the impact? Does it impact level of service? No or little impact, some, significant and direct, and both direct and indirect, meaning that there's an explanation of what indirect and direct means. What is it? Regulatory compliance, and then we could add to this list as well, so we know what are we dealing with if, you know, if things go wrong. So I tried to address types of questions also. Sorry, Scott?
No,
Oh,
I said
no,
nice.
I was just
That's
scratching
good.
my head.
Okay. You know, and then how much do you have documented? You know, do you know who's involved? Do you know what the activities are? And then it's like,
Yeah.
you know, the documentation today, no, I don't have this documented. Or it's, you know, fully documented and periodically updated.
So
How much do you know about this? You know what I mean?
yeah, so I think what, you know, another way of putting it is that there are different assessments. There's an assessment on the people side, there's an assessment on the process side, and there's an assessment on the technology side, which is kind of the charge, you know, of this group. And what's come up is that integration of those other assessments with this is important, but additionally, on the technology side, looking at data and systems, you know, maybe it's just a separate set of questions. I don't know. I'm just related to those systems and data, rather than just a drop-down menu to say which ones apply, some questions about them, and what are some purposes or gaps or whatever, in the integration aspects of them and the overall system architecture that impact this particular process, which may not be covered in those other assessments, but I think the workshop would help bring this up, and that may just be an outcome, is to go develop something a little further, in terms of this integration and system architecture and the kind of the view of what you're trying to accomplish, and what exists now.
Yeah, I think, Scott, I think, Cello, every time you explain and expand more, all your components are there. It's just the message and how we get the message across there. And I think it's separating the three piece, people, process, technology is good, but I don't think we should separate, if you do the data integration, there's a problem versus if there is a business problem. Because what I see is it's going to be one overarching outcome where it goes from a department. Let me just thinking through how I would use this within clean water services is that, if regulatory affairs, the director will see this is for permit compliance. I want the report to be automated. I want the data to be making sure it's accurate. So that's the business side. I see the audience who's filling in or pick the box is going to be the management or regulatory, the department director level. And then once you go to the process and technology, that's going to be the SMEs who's going to make this happen. I think it should tie with the same problem. Otherwise, your people will lose sight why we're doing this technology project. I think it's really going to be hard to fund the project or invest the project within a district, within the utility. So it's really the audience who's going to be answering the questions. And I just also thinking it might be, I have a comment here, is that Scott talked about some of the insights or experience, how he has went through from a messy data gap map to how they are doing now. I think some real world examples of how utilities have done that, because like for me, I'm a visual person, like to look at the maps and things and versus a table box. This is that comes later once you kind of sort through what the process going and which box you need to fill. But first, for me, it's helpful to look at how the data is messy or connected. And what I have also asked the team members is that, whenever you do a data integration or system integration, and produce a data map as well. And it wasn't there in the past, and only the person who's doing that project knows how the data flows. Ironically, it's just nobody else knows how the data is actually connected at the back end. So it sounds very interesting, but it's a true reality, what I learned.
So Ting, are you identifying what the problem is in the process that you're designing there? Are you identifying what the problems are that you're trying to solve?
I'm not sure. Oh, when I do the data map, or I'm not sure.
Yeah. You basically are taking an as is and developing a to be process for taking these different application. I'm
trying to do that. We have a data management hub. So basically we have like a dozen people from each department looking to that. And the challenge is that sometimes they lose the attraction from the leadership level because they all have other jobs and work to do. That's why what I found a good way to develop the data map is, the director saying, oh, we have this problem. I can't see this data and can't make decisions. And then you are using the data map and the integration to support that problem is really helpful.
Right.
I agree. Another one too, in that same vein, is there are occasions where we will see things on the data side before it even hits the business process, right? Say there's a new regulation coming down the pike. I can say, hey, our data doesn't support you being able to get that information. That's been particularly true in for example, our consent decree that we are under, right? There are certain things that we have to do, we have to deliver every year. And some of the things that were asked, our data was not set up at all to do that. And because of that, that's where the data mapping really helps you a lot, because many times the systems, whatever the source system that you're pulling it from, is not designed to give you what that regulation or that business outcome is. And so there's a whole other strategic planning process around that you have to, sort of accommodate. And it is mapping. I mean, essentially that's what it is. One other note I'll say, whenever we get a workflow diagram, like a business process workflow diagram anymore, I won't take it unless somebody attaches as part of the diagram all of the associated systems that they use to accomplish the diagram, to accomplish the business workflow. Because really every one of those workflows is dependent on the technology anymore. It's not even, the steps are 99% technology. So
I totally get it. And let me see if this is gonna, you see those questions that I asked about the business process, that basically had, what's the scope, what's the impact that I shared with you. There are also about, how much do you have documentation of the process. Actually, what we don't have currently is the level of documentation on the data. That would include data architecture, and that would be a good addition for the technology side, because the same way you don't really know what you're doing unless you can show somebody a document that says this is how we're doing it, and it's been vetted and then updated. So we can definitely, and just to say, what we're doing is dealing with that very first step, just assessing system maturity, not yet to analyze the system state, design the new one, planning. So what the questions that I showed really had to do, like, where are you in terms of this? Do you have requirements? The first thing that somebody, when they said we need new technology, when the person comes in, they will say, what are your requirements? Well, do you have requirements? Are you measuring your performance? Are you using these measurements for performance? So it's really addressing this. But that when we come to processes, the lack of documentation is a real problem if you don't have it to analyze the as system state. So that's why you, Scott, say, okay, in this documentation, I also want to have documentation about the systems and the data. And that's a very important point. And that's how we can get
in
to
most
the
cases, none of those business processes work without data. They don't.
Yeah.
There is no process without the data. So it's literally just as it is integral. So
yeah. So I think that if we can deal with this assessment maturity part, and then also make sure that we understand that when you come to the next stage, this is basically, business process model is basically a system model. It's not a maturity model. It's a system model, says how the system works. So we can have equivalent type of notation, and that talks about the data and the systems. Some of it is included in the BPMN, but you may have also data entity relationship diagrams. You may have all sorts of other things. So we can definitely expand in that, we can definitely include that in the next generation. At that point, in this point in time, I was just kind of looking as far as data. I didn't get, this is my homework for Mike Sweeney here, that I was doing. But that's why, we have the team, the core team to help us with this. Let me just see the comment from Yvonne. Okay, so Yvonne is saying, give me just a second. Yeah. Yvonne is saying that we should go. Yvonne, can you help me understand so I don't misinterpret what you said in the comment?
Oh, for Yvonne, I think she's also looking to, guidance on who needs to be involved in each of this, the template and the systems that people need to fill in.
Yes, I mean, that was the reason, you know, the only way you're gonna find out, well, it's not the only way, but the best, the most, what makes most rational way to find out who should be involved is that you have a business process model, you get swim lanes. And you say, you know, who's involved, who's doing different things.
Yeah, that's kind of how to do it. But I
Yeah.
think that Yvonne, and I don't know if she's still on or not.
No,
but-
she's not.
Yeah, but I think what she's saying is for a next session, it might be good to, you know, say using the particular process that, let's say you all have identified that's going to get looked at. What are the problems or the challenges that exist associated with that, including a discussion around who should be involved in you know, when you go about it within your utility. To have that discussion before you get to the use of the tool itself.
I think that's
Okay.
what she meant, yeah.
Well,
I need to jump off to another call, Cello.
okay, well, thank you, Ting. Thank you, Ting.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Bye now.
Yeah. So, Mike, we haven't heard much from you. Do you have any thoughts, ideas?
Yeah, I think we're generally on the right track here, but I worried to the pedestrian user that we're getting pretty complicated, but your slides really help though. The assessment makes sense to me. I think, and Scott Parker's question is, what are we doing? It's bouncing in my head, you know, the Covey thing. And I'm trying to go back to my comment that sort of triggered a lot of this. I think that the thought was that we could enter into WISE as we know it today from different perspectives. And this team is the technology, data, and so forth perspective. But we're smart enough people and experienced enough people knowing, and we're fresh, a couple of us from the Oregon conference that was almost 2.5 years ago, that people is really the problem, was really the challenge. Technology is easy, but
Yeah, once
implementing it.
My saying is, once it hits the technology, I can make it do whatever you want it to do.
Right. There's so many choices out there. There's so much flexibility. There's integration capabilities and all that kind of stuff. But to arrive at that point and to do it right and to serve the purpose of improving it continuously, it's the people side. It's the business processes and people and all that. So anyway, where I'm heading here is maybe a simplification or just something to keep in mind quite simply is that if you're going through this process, you're going to quickly, I think, realize that there's a gap, at least for some users. There's a gap between where I'm at now and where I need to be and how to define that gap. Is that a technology gap? Is it a people gap? Is it a process? Or is it a combination of all three? And I think we're back to what I was saying. I think the assessment will help tease that out. It just to explain it in an elevator type of way, it's for assessments like this, and most assessments, is you're trying to discover and define a gap of your, what either your pain, make the pain go away, or aspire to achieving a dream, if you will. That, we want to do something for our customers, et cetera, et cetera. We have this idea of using our data or collecting some new data or combining with whatever, the data part of it, and help decision making, make the right decisions, make them more timely and all that kind of stuff. Well, there's something in the middle called a gap because nothing's perfect. And so if we can keep pursuing what we're doing and create it and make it clear to people on our team and outside of our team that here's what we're running into. We're going to base the foundation on other things that WISE has been involved with in the past and is creating as we speak. to speak to the gap of implementing a technology solution that is impactful. So the key word from all my yammering here is it's a gap definition that we're after.
Yeah, I call it that problem definition, but essentially it's the same thing, right? It's it's the intersection of a business need, right, and a technological capacity, and it's essentially right. And here's the thing, I think I said this earlier, and maybe this is the most important thing that we do is to sort of how to suss that out, right? Because utilities tend to one way or the other, right? They tend to just fix the business process and don't bring the technology along with it, right? Or they invest in the technology and they don't address the business process. How many systems do utilities own that they never use? And I've never seen. I've worked in 3, and I've consulted in many more, and I've never seen one do it, in balance. It just typically does not. So
Same here.
The nature of what we're after here is like, how do you? And this is where again I think our real world examples, like Ting was suggesting, there are some examples of where we've done that, and I'm sure other places as well. And that, to your point for the assessment, is like. I believe that's the most important. Can I say one more thing? I'm sorry. You said something else I want. The thing that I think often gets missed in this is, there's people, process, technology. But remember, technology is dependent on people. And it's on two ways for that, right? One is the technology itself has to be managed just like people have to be managed, right? And that takes resources, right? So if I'm building you a tool that doesn't affect your business process correctly and the people in that process, then I'm spending way more in managing that process on the technology side. I guess I just want to make sure that that's like the technology, they're all intertwined, right? They're all literally intertwined, such that it's not a people problem or a technology problem. It's essentially, if you have one of any of the 3, you have all 3. Does that make sense? I agree. You have a problem for all 3.
There's another layer, a complementary layer. Maybe another way of saying the same thing is that we're all consumers and we're all providers when it comes to data.
And we're all interdependent. They're interdependent completely on one another. Completely.
Correct.
Because if I make it easier on the business process and I don't leave the technology, if I leave the technology behind, almost always I've got a higher investment on the people and the technology side to make it easier for the business process side, right?
Right.
I'm thinking of that sustainability thing, right? The triple bottom line. It's almost like a different type of triple bottom line, but it's essentially the same concept.
Right. And just you said sustainability. It can be a fluffy word, but it's an important concept. Cello, I think you covered that when you talk about documentation, the lack thereof or whatever. It's part of the assessment design, as you so much pointed that out, that I think all the elements are there. I'm just putting my hat on as to somebody new to WISE and trying to figure this out. And I think we're on the right track here. It's just we just got to be succinct and clear as to what it is that we're trying to do at this particular phase. And you reminded us we're only parking the car at the ballpark here. This is just the beginning of it. We haven't talked about to-be process, implementation, all that kind of stuff. We're just really getting started, but I think it's a really good start. We just need to be conscious of making it clear. And maybe every third slide reminding people this is what we're after here. We're trying to uncover a people, processes, and technology gap and define it in ways that's meaningful going forward.
Yeah, well, maturity.
In a word, maturity, right?
Yeah, that's what that's the sort of limited scope of where we are right now on the technology, and what I think
you've done for the workshop coming up is you put up an abundance of, I'll use a Elon Musk term, and I think beyond him, these Easter eggs. They're more than that. There's a lot here in terms of content. And once you spend a few minutes kind of setting it up for the input phase of the workshop, there's plenty there. And you've probably left some things out, and I think it's perfect because you want participation, you want people to be paying attention and adding to it or modifying or whatever. That's the objective of the workshop, is to take this and make it even better, and people start buying into it.
I think my sense is that what the straw man that I have, and it's just you know, an attempt to get you know, a maturity assessment, could benefit from, you know, some of the things, from all of the things that were said here today, including Scott Parker's thing about you know, being able to demonstrate that the data has problems, to identifying I'm looking for my notes, you know, have
Hey, it's
approach
recorded,
from
so you can just go back and look at it.
yeah, you know, and approach from different angles and stuff. But I think that my sense is that this stuff that I shared today, maybe the broader team is not yet ready for.
No, maybe not. Right.
Maybe because what Yvonne is saying, okay, you know, let's go back to the mural tools after we do these other things. And maybe in the meantime, so, you know, between Scott and Ting and Yvonne and you, Mike, maybe we can spruce up this stuff that I have before we put it out for prime time for everybody to discuss. And maybe we can try, you know, hopefully we can try to address Scott's concerns. I don't mind changing it around at all, you know, tumbling it up and stuff like that. I mean, I tried different.
No, I get that, Cello. You know, I know where you're headed with this, but what we're creating here is the unified theory, and if you will, and it's well on the way to incorporating a lot of thought, a lot of perspective, a lot of work here. And yeah, I agree. It's probably not quite ready for prime time, but boy, when it is, it's pretty powerful.
I think we're going to have something, you know, and the reason that I went away from Microsoft Teams, not Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Forms, is for two reasons. First of all, Microsoft Forms really lacks some functionality that is required, you know, to make this work. One of them is the you know, ability to carry forward the responses, and that you shape the subsequent questions. You know, you change the question 4 based on what people said in question 3. You know, in how they responded to question 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I put it all in a spreadsheet that would be easier for people to deal. Everybody knows Excel. I put it into format that would be a lot easier to deal with in Power BI or something like that. And
right.
So, but I would certainly very much be keen to go through 1 or 2 more cycles with this core team to see how we can improve it before we put it together. And then maybe on the next, all, you know, everybody,
all hands
on this topic. We can talk about the challenges and data problems and stuff like that. We can certainly do that. I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but I think I have, and I think that Scott has, and you, Mike, and I think we have reasonably good guess of what the challenges are. But it may be good to give people an opportunity to talk about them and to say them, and for us to record them. Although I think, you know, for us who've been around for a little while, it's just like, okay, I know, you know, I know where the snakes are, you know.
Mines.
Yeah.
However, you know, it will be a larger team, and if the example, if it's Ting's example, let's say, of the business process, and you say, here's the business process, and here's how it's developed so far for an as is, what are the problems and challenges associated with it, and as it relates to you and your organization, that's probably a worthwhile discussion to have with the group overall to get people engaged in it.
Yeah,
100%.
that makes sense.
There's going to be a rhyme and something going on in their organization to what she's dealing with, I guarantee.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, let me stop the recording now.
Oh, no, you recorded this. I forgot.
Yeah.
It was a great summary, Mike.